Great hour. Thank you for being with me. I'm Harris. Here's the Daily Briefing.
America's chief law enforcement officer facing a new lawsuit as Senate Democrats challenge the appointment of acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Senators Whitehouse, Hirono, and Blumenthal filing suit in federal court, claiming Whitaker's appointment is unconstitutional because he was not confirmed by the Senate. While the president tells Chris Wallace it's unlikely he'll sit down for an interview in the Russia investigation.
There's going to be no sit-down interview and nothing, written or in person, on obstruction.
I would say probably. Probably. I mean, I can change my mind, but probably. I think we've wasted enough time on this witch hunt, and the answer is probably. We're finished.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has the latest developments. John.
Hey, good afternoon to you, Dana. While we're told, and the president would seem to indicate that it's unlikely that he would do a sit-down interview with Robert Mueller, at least in the near term, there is still the potential down the road for the president to do a follow-up interview with Mueller in person. His attorneys have not yet made that decision, and I don't even really know if they've talked to the president much about it, but Mueller has asked for a possible in-person follow-up interview after they provide the written questions. The president is going to provide the answers to those written questions sometime in the future. We're told it's not going to happen today. It's possible it could happen before Thanksgiving. Fox is told, though, that after nearly a year of negotiation with the special counsel's office over this idea of an interview, the president is just anxious to get it behind him. Here's what he told Chris Wallace yesterday.
The questions were asked and answered. It wasn't a big deal. You know, they make it like I had meetings for many, many hours. I got the questions. I responded. We wrote them out. I read them once. I read them a second time. We made some changes. That's it. They're very simple.
The president is also continuing to put his full support behind his interim Attorney General, Matt Whitaker. The president doesn't appear to be in any hurry to replace him and find a permanent successor to Jeff Sessions. The White House believes that under the statute, Whitaker can stay in that position for at least 200 days. And the president told Chris Wallace yesterday that if Whitaker does move to rein in the Mueller probe, that would be Whitaker's decision and that the president would not get involved. Listen here.
Look, it's going to be up to him. I think he's very well aware politically. I think he's astute politically. He's a very smart person.
But you won't overrule him if he decides to curtail.
I would not get involved. And all these people that say, I'm going to end the investigation, you know, they've been saying that now for how long has this witch hunt gone on?
Whitaker certainly has been an outspoken critic of the Mueller investigation, particularly this idea, Dana, that he went way further afield than what his mandate allowed him to do. But so far, there's no indication that Whitaker would seek to rein in the Mueller investigation. And what I'm told from the president's outside attorneys is, look, we're probably near the end of this thing. They don't want to do anything that would throw a monkey wrench into it.
Right. Everyone wants it to wrap up. All right, John Roberts, have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Republicans will likely have 53 senators in January after Democrat Bill Nelson conceded to Rick Scott this weekend. The move came after contentious recounts in the Florida Senate and governor's races. I'm joined now by Josh Kraushaar. He's politics editor at the National Journal. Senator Scott is now going to, well, he's Senator-elect Scott. He'll get to Washington, D.C., but that recount maybe shaved a few years off of his life down there.
And it was a close race, but it's good news for Republicans and certainly for President Trump looking at the 2020 map, because Florida is absolutely essential to any path to victory the president's going to have in a couple of years. And the fact that even in a blue wave, even in an environment that was very favorable to Democrats, Republicans won the Senate race, they won the governor's race. Those are two good signs for Republicans, and it makes Mitch McConnell a lot happier now that he has a likely 53 seats in the Senate. Yeah,
53 is better than 52 if you're counting as a majority leader. Do you think that Florida can basically get its act together, those two counties in particular, Broward and Palm Beach County, to have a better election in 2020?
It's just amazing that we had the butterfly ballot in 2000, and it's been 18 years, and you have the same election issues. But, with Snipes stepping down and perhaps a more successful administrator taking over in Broward and maybe new leadership, that could change.
So I was reading your column this weekend, and one of the things I wanted to show is that the Republicans were able to flip 4 Senate seats in this midterm election. You had North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri, and now Florida, as we just said. But the 2020 map, how does that look for Democrats and Republicans?
Well, Florida, by the way, is a huge insurance policy. Rick Scott is Mitch McConnell's insurance policy for 2020 because 53 seats for McConnell is a lot better than 52. And when you look at the map for 2020, it's going to be Democrats going on offense. They'll have a lot more opportunities to win seats than the Republicans. But on the other hand, there are only 2 seats that Republicans hold that are in states that Hillary Clinton won. And one of those seats is Susan Collins, who's got sky-high job approval ratings in Maine. So the map is and Doug Jones is also hanging out there in Alabama, and he's going to be the most vulnerable senator in the entire country. So when you think about 53 seats, McConnell probably has about 4 seats that he can lose if Jones doesn't win in Alabama.
And the president is going to head to Mississippi to help rally for that Senate election there. Do Republicans have really anything to worry about in Mississippi?
Well, when you have a special election or a runoff in this case, it's always unpredictable who's going to show up. And I think Trump wants to make sure Republicans in Mississippi show up for Cindy Hyde-Smith. But, and she's made some gaffes on the campaign trail. So it's an extra cautious move to make sure Republicans vote in Mississippi.
Look, insurance they call it insurance for a reason. My last question for you, just before you came on air, a new letter against Nancy Pelosi being the next Speaker of the House, signed by 17 Democrats, has just been released. Maybe it wasn't. It's 16 Democrats. Okay, there's Nancy Pelosi doesn't have a lot of room here to play with. What do you think is going on?
The one thing that was really striking about that letter, first of all, there is a base of discontent within the Democratic Party caucus in the House. But all but 2 of the Democrats who signed the letter are men. And there are not a whole lot of freshmen who were just elected. So I kind of wonder whether that will hold, whether they'll be able to sustain that opposition if Pelosi is able to kind of make her own move with her caucus. It's a big number, but I wonder how flexible some of those House Democrats' opposition are.
So when Marcia Fudge, who had that big meeting with Pelosi last week and said she will make her decision after the holiday, Thanksgiving, as to whether or not she would challenge Nancy Pelosi for the speakership, she's not on the list. Does that say anything to you?
I think that's an important sign for Pelosi. You can't beat Nancy Pelosi with no one. And I thought it was striking that over the weekend, Congresswoman Fudge was actually saying some nice things about Pelosi's leadership in the House. And that doesn't sound like the rhetoric of someone looking to challenge her for the speakership. So it's notable that you got 16 Democrats saying that they don't want to support Pelosi, but I still think Pelosi has time and some wiggle room to make that change.
All right, but it'll still be tight, so we'll pay attention to it. Josh Kraushaar, thank you.
Thanks.
Fox News alert out of California, where residents are coming to grips with the devastation from wildfires still burning in the state. At least 80 people are dead and 1,000 others unaccounted for, with loved ones desperately seeking information on their whereabouts. Claudia Cowan is live in Chico, California, where many of the displaced families are lining up to get help. Claudia.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, Dana. For thousands of Camp Fire survivors, this disaster recovery center in Chico is their first stop on the long road to recovery and rebuilding. Here, they can register with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, to apply for federal aid. They can also access services like the DMV and mental health counseling. Several dozen agencies are here at this one-stop shop that will remain open until it's no longer needed, likely sometime next year. Over the weekend, President Trump surveyed the damage in Paradise survivors to make sure they are getting everything they need from their insurers, and also to educate them about how to avoid getting scammed. Always a problem after these major catastrophes.
That's a really good point, Claudia, and we'll stay on top of that as well. Thank you. Republicans set to send the fewest number of women to Washington in more than 2 decades. Ahead, how one congresswoman is looking to reverse the trend. Plus, protests growing on the southern border as the migrant caravan stalls in Tijuana. William Lajeunesse is there. William, what's the... Growing protests in Tijuana, Mexico, as some residents are upset with the number of migrants waiting there to apply for asylum in the United States. Thousands of people are already at camps set up for the migrants, with new arrivals every day. William Lajeunesse has been following the caravan for weeks. He joins us now. William, why are some in Tijuana upset?
Well, you know, Mexico, think of Mexico as having this invisible river of Central American migrants that's been going on for generations and for decades. But for some reason, this caravan, either it's because of the number or how many, seems to have awakened a silent part of the population that opposes illegal immigration. Now, I want to tell you why we're here. We're at the San Ysidro Port of Entry, the busiest port in the United States, 120,000 people a day. Now, you see these barriers? These are temporary, and they're allowed to bring them over very quickly to close this part of the barrier. As they did yesterday, they closed the port because they said some migrants were going to try to breach these vehicle lanes. Also, the United States, as we move up here, has closed from 26 to 15 lanes. This is people, this is commerce, this is money. This is a message that Mexico understands. But let's look at that video from yesterday, Dana. 1,000 people throwing bottles and cans at riot police, yelling, "Viva Mexico," and Hondurans go home. They say immigrants yes, invaders no. The police put up a barricade. They were able to stop them from confronting the migrants at their shelter.
You see people, within the migrant caravan smoking weed, drinking, throwing rocks at the cops, causing chaos.
Some of these people that are coming into with these caravans are committing crimes, and so we are protesting. I am protesting that we want the government to take control.
Now, I just got off a call with DHS officials who say there are 500 criminals within the caravan. They can't identify them specifically to us right now because of the means and methods, but nevertheless, they say that it's a disservice for attorneys from the National Lawyers Guild or Southern Poverty Law activists coaching them, because they say ultimately only 9% ever get an asylum claim that's approved. Dana?
Tell me about the supporters that the migrants still have.
Well, you know, you saw them coming up through Mexico, and the generosity of the Mexican people kept them going with food and so forth. So there are definitely still supporters here who basically say, listen, this is a nation of immigrants. There's a lot of Mexicans in the United States, and they feel that Mexico has a right, a duty, a responsibility to provide protection and welcome them. And here's what they say.
It feels like they invaded, and that was not the correct way. But I know all of them are not like that.
We are here for work, to have a better life, and no trouble, not troublemakers.
The one takeaway I have, Dana, from doing this for 5 weeks is, number one, they are realizing suddenly now they're in a rock and a hard place. They can't get over this border. They have to wait at least 5 weeks to even file an asylum claim. So many are saying, listen, maybe I have to work here in Mexico for a period of time, maybe stay here, raise some money, hire a coyote. I will also say that the U.S. did confirm there have been arrests of caravan members, both here in San Diego as well as Arizona. Today they have a job fair, so some can stay here in Mexico and work. Dana?
All right, William Lajeunesse, thank you for that report. Republican leaders confronting a shortage of women on Capitol Hill. Ahead, how they hope to reverse the slide in the House. Plus, a California town reduced to ashes, how the school district plans to move forward following the disaster.
We lost our town. We lost our buildings. We lost our homes. But we did not lose our district. But we're Paradise Unified. And that's our laser focus, and we will come back, and we will come back strong.
It's very important for us to have as many women as we can. It's important to have a diverse conference. But bad policy coming out of the Democrats' diverse conference is still going to be bad policy. We as Republicans are never going to be in a situation where we are trying to segment women and say they only can be concerned about certain issues.
Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, House GOP conference chair, on how Republicans will try to connect with women voters in the future. There will be just 13 Republican women in the House come January. That's a sharp drop from those serving now and the lowest number since 1994. I'm joined now by Anna Palmer. She's Political Playbook co-author and host of the Women Rule podcast, which I've been on and I loved. I want to read you this from Elise Stefanik. She's a young Republican woman from upstate New York. She was at the conference the other day, and she said to the group, take a look look around. This is not reflective of the American public. We were having problems with women voters before that. 3 Republican women lost their races in this midterm election: Mimi Walters, Karen Handel, and Barbara Comstock. Of course, Kristi Noem did get elected governor of South Dakota, so there was upward movement there. Do the Republicans realize they have a problem?
I think they do. I've talked to a lot of operatives over the last week saying, guys, this was supposed to be the year of the woman, the wave, and it really was a blue wave of women. It wasn't a Republican wave, and they're trying to kind of assess what to do about it. I think they've struggled for at least the half dozen years trying to figure out recruitment, how to get women to step up, and they have just not been able, like Democrats, to really figure out what the way forward.
Well, to Congresswoman Cheney's point that Republicans typically have said, look, we just want the best person for the job, and we just want to have good policy, and it doesn't matter it's coming from. But I think to Elise Stefanik's point is that if you look at the long-term future of the party, that we have to figure this out. What are the Democrats doing differently, aside from the policy areas, that give them these candidates that can step up, run for office, raise the money, and then win?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things in particular. One, they have a pipeline. They have an infrastructure where if there's women who become activists, let's say after President Trump's inauguration, there were a lot of Democrats on the left, liberals, women that had never been involved in politics. And they said, I want to raise my hand. There's Emily's List. There's a lot of other outside groups that train them how to do the basic blocking and tackling of running a campaign.
And they've been doing that for decades?
Yes, absolutely.
So they have a pipeline.
It's that. And number 2, it really is, as you said, money. Money is the hardest thing. Women hate asking for it. It's most politicians in general, male or female, hate asking for it. But you have to have it in order to run a race. And Republicans have really fallen behind on the online money game.
And so Elise Stefanik said she's not going to do the recruitment so much. She's going to focus on helping women win in their primaries because that had been a problem. I also want to mention Stacey Abrams. Take a listen to her. She's just lost the governor's race in Georgia. Take a listen to what she said.
I'm going to spend the next year as a private citizen, but I do indeed intend to run for office again. I'm not sure for what, and I am not exactly certain when. I need to take a nap, but once I do, I'm planning to get back into the ring.
I wanted to ask you about that. Women who take the plunge and they run for office, if they lose, are they more or less likely to run again?
I don't know the exact statistics, but I think for all of us, if you raise your hand and it gets swatted down, you're less likely to go for it again. So I think that's probably inherent to most people in general. But certainly one of the things that a lot of operatives would tell you, Republican or Democrat, if you've done it once, you know what it takes. Get up there, do it again.
Right. And then you also know how to pick up that phone and ask for money, because I understand that was a big frustration with a lot of members or candidates this time around, that there was just so much money involved and the Republicans were at a real deficit financially.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're a first-time candidate, you don't have that network, right? You're not used to asking your parents, your uncle, your cousin for $20, $50, much less the big checks that you really need from big Republican donors.
Anybody exciting we should be listening to on the Women Rule podcast this week?
Yeah, absolutely. This week, we just had Kim Davis, who runs the NHL, the hockey league's effort in terms of getting more diverse audience. And this week we have Gazelle Hashemian, who is a woman private venture capitalist.
All right. Well, very exciting. Nice diversity. Of course, not just politics, but you can hear from all sorts of women, successful women on your podcast.
Absolutely.
Anna Palmer, thank you.
Thanks.
President Trump weighing in on the role the Saudi crown prince may have played in the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi.
Question. Did MBS lie to you, sir?
I don't know. You know, who can really know? But I can say this. He's got many people now that say he had no knowledge.
Plus, wet weather moving into the California wildfire zone, bringing a whole new set of challenges. Jonathan Hunt is live in Malibu. Jonathan?
Dana, after the fires, the rain, and fears that those wildfires could now be followed by devastating mudslides. We'll explain why after the break.
Fox News alert from Wall Street. Stocks are tumbling amid growing concerns about trade. Technology shares dragging down the markets in this short holiday week, so we'll keep an eye on that. Fox News alert on the deadliest wildfires in California history, with rain now in the forecast, which could only complicate search and rescue efforts, but create another kind of disaster. Jonathan Hunt is live in Malibu. Jonathan?
Dana, you heard Claudia Cowan talking earlier about how rain might complicate efforts up north to find and identify any human remains that are still within the burn site. Here in Southern California, rain is also an issue, but for a different reason. We're standing on a bluff above the Pacific Ocean here in Malibu, and looming over us right there are the Santa Monica Mountains. Now, you can just see the burn right across them, and what has happened is that the fire has stripped all the vegetation, all the trees, all the brush. When that happens, the soil and all the rocks, etc., essentially lose their anchor. So the fear is that if the rains come down as forecast in the middle of this week, just before Thanksgiving, then that could generate mudslides. We saw it last year after the awful fires in Santa Barbara, followed by winter rains and deadly mudslides. That's the great fear right now. Meantime, Malibu is trying to put itself back together. We were out just a short time ago driving along some of the streets. You can take a look at the video there, and pretty much every street you go down, you find scores and scores of power workers who are trying to get all the power lines back up and basically get this small city back up and running. It's not easy. A lot of the schools, for instance, are telling us that they will certainly be closed through till next Monday. It may even have to be much longer than that because they have to get everything back together. They have to make sure it's safe for the students to come in. Meantime, Malibu has been opened almost entirely now to residents who want to get back to their homes. But Dana, as you look at the scene around us here, hundreds of families here in Malibu are going to come back to find that there is literally nothing left to come back to. It is going to be anything but a happy Thanksgiving for a lot of people here in Southern California and up north, where my friend Claudia Cowan has been doing such great reporting too.
She has, and we should all keep everybody in mind, thoughts and prayers, absolutely, and to stay safe, listen to your local authorities. Jonathan, thanks. We'll be back in touch with you. From Malibu to Chico now, where the wildfires not only destroyed homes, but are also wreaking havoc with the educational system. After burning at least one elementary school to the ground and damaging others. Tim Taylor is the Butte County Superintendent. He joins me now. Over the weekend, I had somebody message me on Instagram saying that the schools need some attention out there because you're trying to figure out a way to get these children back in school, get the teachers back in the classrooms. You need portable classrooms. There's a lot of things that you need. Tell us about your experience.
Well, thank you. I think the first and foremost thing is we have a target date of December 3rd to get all kids back into a school setting. Longer term, we're going to have to look at interim portable campuses, but we got to get these kids back in school, and we're working very hard to do that, to get our mental health counselors, teachers, and administrators to do that. Just to give you a little quick snapshot, there's 32,000 kids in this county that go to schools. We have probably about 5,000 to 5,700 students that are now homeless without a house. And to really zero it in, I heard from the athletic director at Paradise High, out of the 200 athletes that are playing sports, 195 are homeless. That's the severity of this. So our first goal is to get that December 3rd start date. We probably have between 500 and 700 teachers that are homeless. So it's a very complicated thing to get our teachers prepared for that December 3rd date. And we're working all throughout the state to get help on that because this is a very massive problem.
Sir, if there isn't a place for them to stay and live and lay their head at night, how will they be able to even come to a school?
Well, we know that many have already moved out of the county and gone to places where they have other relatives. So we are definitely going to lose a lot of children that can't come back to our schools here in Butte County. The rest of the community is really bonding together to help get them housing, and it's a dual effort. It's social services working with education to do that. And our number one goal is to get those students back with the teacher they had before the fire. That's our number one goal. We know that's not a reality because many have had to find wherever housing's at. And since they're homeless, they have the federal right to go into any school that they are temporarily residing in. So they have a lot of rights that now protect them. But we'd love to have every kid get back with that teacher they had before. That'd be the best thing for their trauma.
And that was going to be my last question for you. Tell me what the children need right now, if there's ways that we can help. I assume that part of it is just having somebody there that they can talk to, because I'm sure the trauma is something that they kind of internalize as they try to figure out with their families what they're going to do next.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a really great team that is going to put together a trauma team. I think what America can do for us is really, I think, keep us in your thoughts and prayers. It's very important. I think, secondly, this is way out of our league. We're a spaghetti feed, fun run, small town, rural community. So these people, these major donors and corporations are overwhelming. So I'm putting together a team to deal with that and get a message out what we need. Really, there's plenty of much clothes and stuff coming in. We're going to need funding, and we're really going to need somebody to really help organize us, because we're not equipped for something like this, but people are going to help us. I think the last thing, because everybody told me to do this for you, I meant that. The other day I was in a press conference saying I'd really like to see Beyonce and Garth Brooks come up here and do a concert for the kids before they start that December 3rd. They need something positive. We don't want to a fundraiser, Live Aid or anything. I just like them to go play a little concert for the kids to get them back into some normalcy. So I'm going to push that out. I'm not trying to shame them. If they can't do it, if they can't shame it, give me somebody else.
So we have a call for entertainment. That's what you're saying, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, the kids need some fun. They're stuck in tents and all that. Kids. So yeah, they really need that. So
well, they're lucky to have you as they're at the helm there in the Butte County. We appreciate you coming on today, and we wish you the best. We'll stay in touch. Tim Taylor, thank you. Fox News alert on the murder of Jamal Khashoggi as we learn that the official U.S. report on the case should be out tomorrow. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has talked to President Trump several times and repeatedly denied any involvement in the killing of the Washington Post columnist. Benjamin Hall is live in London with more. Ben, do we know what to expect from the CIA report?
You know, Dana, it's been a few weeks since Gina Haspel went to Turkey to try and get as much information about this as she could. And both the CIA and the intelligence services are keeping the investigation incredibly close to them. But as you say, what everyone's going to be looking for when this comes out, we think tomorrow, is whether Mohammed bin Salman knew about it in advance, whether he sanctioned it. At the moment, there are some people who say they're sure he did, particularly among the US and the US government, and among them chiefly Lindsey Graham.
They're an important ally, but when it comes to the Crown Prince, he's irrational, he's unhinged, and I think he's done a lot of damage to the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia.
It's also been over a month since Secretary Pompeo met with King Salman and the Crown Prince himself in Riyadh. And while the Washington Post claims that the CIA does believe the Crown Prince ordered the killing, the White House themselves has not yet reached that conclusion, nor has President Trump yet heard the infamous tape, supposedly, of the murder.
We have the tape. I don't want to hear the tape. No reason for me to hear the tape.
Why don't you want to hear it, sir?
Because it's a suffering tape. It's a terrible tape. I've been fully briefed on it. There's no reason for me to hear it.
And the State Department also releasing a statement yesterday saying that they weren't going to jump to conclusions. They wanted to hear what the intelligence services had to say. But certainly at that point, big geopolitical decisions perhaps to be taken. David?
And Ben, I want to ask you, what could the consequences, if any, be if MBS is involved?
You know, we're already seeing a few ramifications at the moment. One of the chief ones, we're seeing some people call for this, a stop to cease the arms sales to Saudi Arabia. And that would be a major, again, geopolitical event. There have already been some other repercussions. 4 days after the U.S. placed sanctions on 17 Saudis in relation to this murder, Germany has just today also banned 18 Saudis from entering into the European zone. So that's what we're seeing. Germany also saying it's going to cease arms sales, even those pre-orders it's had. So we're starting to see some potential ramifications, especially bearing in mind how close Saudi Arabia is to the U.S. when it comes to intelligence sharing, the war on terror, the pushback against Iran. I think tomorrow's going to be a major day for many people in the international community.
All right, well, we'll probably see you again. Benjamin Hall, thank you.
Senator McCain is irreplaceable, but his example will guide our next steps forward. He taught us to always assume the best in others, to seek compromise instead of sowing division, and to always put country ahead of party.
Kyrsten Sinema talking up bipartisanship after her narrow victory in Arizona's Senate race. The state just one of several where Americans split their votes between Democrats and Republicans in the midterms. We're learning more about that, what that trend could mean for 2020. Plus, a warning from an Olympic champion after he nearly fell for a new scam. And follow us on social media. We're on Twitter @DailyBrief. A terrifying ordeal for Olympic swimming legend Rowdy Gaines, his wife and daughter, who's away at college. First, scammers phoned his daughter pretending to be the police. At the same time, they called his wife, claiming they were holding his daughter hostage. Then they connected both calls so Rowdy and his wife could hear the girl's panicked voice. That's when they called police, who told them it was a scam they had seen before. So be on the lookout for that. Democrats are looking for a new strategy to motivate voters ahead of 2020 after many Americans voted for both Democrats and Republicans in the midterms. In Arizona, roughly 188,000 of the state's 2.3 million voters chose Democrat Kyrsten Sinema for the Senate, but Republican Doug Ducey for governor. Joining me now is former senior advisor to Secretary John Kerry, Marianne Marsh, also Chapin Fay, a former National Republican Congressional Committee aide, here in New York City with me on set, which is always great. I thought that was interesting. If you take a look at this map, in Massachusetts, Maryland, Arizona, and Ohio, voters chose Republican governors and Democrat senators. And the Washington Post saying today, a vote for a politician headed to Washington was often closely tied to a voter's feelings about President Trump, while many gubernatorial candidates were able to distance themselves from the polarizing president. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, I'm from Massachusetts. It's a different story there. Charlie Baker not only takes up all the independent voters there because they're 52% of the registration, he actually ran ahead of the Democratic nominee with Democrats. And that's the formula. They saw him as somebody who could get things done versus picking a fight in Washington, D.C. I think many people want to see executives, people who are governors, fixing problems at home and leave the fights for Washington.
And do you think, was that different from 2016 at all?
Well, I think we've been a little ahead of the curve, what you're seeing in Arizona and elsewhere, which you referenced at the top, where you have to get 20 to 27% nationally on average of independent voters to win. And that's if you hold every single Democrat or every single Republican, depending upon which party you're running from.
So what do you think, Chapin, about that for Republicans? Because the an election between two people is different from a midterm.
Right, that's right. And Americans, there's no question Americans like divided government, right? There's historical precedent for the House flipping in midterm elections, 94, 2006, 2010. So I think that the Democrats achieved a historical minimum of what they needed to do. I think the intensity and rage that, quite frankly, that this president inspires in the left probably won them a few extra seats. But the rubber meets the road in 2020 if they can. The battle is over the suburbs, right? The country is divided geographically.
It's fascinating to me. I love covering this.
Really well in this time.
They did. Republicans have to pay attention. I want to read to you from Liz Peek. She's a columnist at The Hill about Democrats. She said, in coming months, Mr. Schumer and his counterpart in the House will play ringmasters to a slew of newly elected Democrats eager to challenge establishment liberals like himself. These disruptors, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, have already shown a lack of respect for the traditions and hierarchies of Congress. Moreover, they embrace policies anathema to mainstream voters who will likely determine the outcome of the 2020 elections. Marianne, we always talk about this, right? There's the push and the pull. The Republicans have gone through that for quite a while. Now the Democrats seem to have quite a few people within range.
Well, yes, and nobody better to handle them than Nancy Pelosi, I will say. But let's look at all this. The fact is, the Democrats that won in this election were overwhelmingly, one, women. For once, it was an advantage, not an albatross. Two, they were in Republican conservative stronghold suburbs, and they had to run as moderates. So the vast majority of new Democrats that won are moderates. In addition to that, the progressives are playing pretty smart. A bunch of them just a few minutes ago pledged their support to Nancy Pelosi in exchange for some deals that they want. So I think you can see both sides of it, but overwhelmingly, it's moderates who did well for the Democrats.
What's interesting, though, is does the center actually get strengthened in the middle of this midterm election?
I don't think so. I think that just the fact that Nancy Pelosi has to campaign for the job when she just won the majority back for them shows that there are all these disparate factions, and I think that the extreme spectrums are going to play. You know, Democrats are out for blood. They're very intense on their side. They all came out to vote, and they want revenge on the president. That's not really a governing philosophy, but I think you'll see investigation after investigation, and they don't really have, I don't think, they're not going to have a positive legislative agenda. I think they're going to be all over the place.
Nancy Pelosi is not to be discounted. No. I mean, she's a strategic player.
She is. I mean, she will be speaker, period, full stop. And unlike Boehner and Ryan, who were forced to leave, she will come back again for the first time in history, anyone pulling that feat off. And she said infrastructure, opioids, justice reform, those kinds of things, in addition to some investigations, we can walk and chew gum.
All right. Marianne Martin Chapin-Fay, great to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks.
An emotional scene as a judge sentences a Colorado man who murdered his pregnant wife and 2 young children.
You disgust me. They were loving and caring people. You may have taken their bodies from me, but you will never take the love they had for me.
When our country used to flex its muscle with